Hello. Good morning. Hello, everyone that is able to be here live. And hello, if you're checking out the replay later. So glad to be in this space with you today. So, this live stream was a divine inspiration there sometime along the way. Was scheduled at the same time as I scheduled the Law of Attraction one that I did last week. And both of them were very inspired by the Leo full moon and wanting to take this energy that I've been feeling and let it fuel me to step out in a new way, in a bold, even way that claims the things that I believe I'm here to do, like I see myself very much as a student in these areas of spirituality and shadow work and astrology and law of attraction. I'm a student at best, I think, personally. But there are so many levels to things that I know there's value in sharing what I've learned so far. So while I'm not a certified professional like therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, I'm not. And I have been to those kinds of professionals and highly recommend those kinds of professionals depending on what it is that you're facing at this chapter in your journey. That support from a trained professional can be critically important. So keep that in mind and feel for yourself what is appropriate, what level of help and support you need. Hello, so good to have everyone here. I'm so excited for this. However, this live stream and this conversation around shadow work that I think, already begun to facilitate around my channel with some videos that I've put out as far as talking about my own shadow work. So, coming to this conversation, my goal is just to share how I approach it, share my perspective, answer any questions that you guys put in the chat as we go, or later, if you're catching the replay, leave it in the comments and I can definitely, let me just change this real quick and make sure I have it showing me all of them. There we go. Yeah. So my perspective, that's what I'm going to share. And if that's helpful and it resonates and it helps you to have a more constructive relationship with your own shadow work, that's what I'm here for. And if there's ever anything that doesn't resonate, it doesn't feel like it fits for you, then please know that you are more than welcome to leave that here in this space. You don't have to take it with you. So I have a whole mountain of things that I want to share. I was journaling to try to kind of move that energy because it felt so big and overwhelming. Like, where do you even start on a topic that you feel so passionate about? And I guess that's where I want to start, is how passionate I am about shadow work. And I personally look at it as a form of light work. So there's a lot out there at this point, a lot more than there used to be, about light workers. And I resonate with a lot of that. And I come to it from more of a place of specifically the shadow part of the light, right? Like, light only exists because of darkness. It's the contrast between the two. It's duality. It's the dark that lets us see the light. So that contrast can't be lost. It's just kind of part of that physical realm. And so there's an acceptance of the duality, acceptance of there are contrasting things. There are dark things. There are hard emotions that come up in this physical experience. And what do we do with that? How do we deal with that? Because I spent a good long while in a very dark place, in a very depressed place. And actually, let me do one more thing real quick. I just remembered. There we go. That may help too. Okay. Yeah, very dark, and spent spent so much energy and so much time trying to figure out what was wrong with me and why I was broken, why I wasn't able to do the things that other people seem to so easily be able to do, like make friends or, like talk to people, like say things out loud without feeling like you're going to throw up, like, those kinds of things, like that humans just seem to know how to do that. And I seem to have missed the day in school where they taught us. And so I have this like really self conscious energy about I don't fit in, I'm different, yada, yada, yada. Basically what I was in that space was this story of this trance of I'm so different, and I had separated myself, and in that separation it felt miserable. And so that was like this beginning of this suffering, and I stayed there for quite a long time. I don't think I probably needed to stay that long. I don't know. It's how long I stayed. It was, a roller coaster basically, and I survived. That's like number one out of the gate. That's pretty cool. I'm still here, and that to me tells me I'm meant to be. I have something of a purpose. Um, so as I accept that there's all of these different spectrum of experiences that we will face in life, there will be things that overwhelm our senses where we're not sure if we can handle this, where we run up against a feeling of hopelessness or judgment, or, I mean, there's so many different little things that spike in our daily experience when we really pay attention to how we feel. And all of that emotion that comes up inside of us, every single piece that rises inside of us is a message that is aiming to guide us towards living a full expression of who we came forward to be. So as these emotional messages rise inside of us, for me personally, when I was in the dark place, I feel like I spent a long time trying to run away from how bad I felt. Like I was trying to just like distract myself from it. I was trying to pretend like it wasn't happening. I mean, it was just all of these different things that I filled my time with all of this stuff outside of myself so that I didn't have to go inward and realize like how badly I was hurting. And they're just like basically at that time, I did not have a tool set. I didn't have skills to be able to like know how to not be crushed, know how to not just like give up, just like be done because this hurts too bad. Um, it hurt too bad. That was I distracting myself from it was the best I could do. And if I could go back and tell myself anything at that time, it would be that you're doing a great job. Like if this is the best you can do is provide a distraction for yourself to get yourself through this really painful moment, you're doing a great job. Reach for whatever feeling of relief is at your level within grasp, and use that relief as much as you can to get through it. And that's where the professionals come in. That's where the therapist or the psychiatrist or whoever it is that is in your world to support you. It could also be like any kind of healer, any kind of energy worker or acupuncturist. I mean, whatever kind of energy work works for you, um, to find that support so that you build your tool set of, as the hard things do come to the surface, we don't run away from it, which only perpetuates a cycle where, like, when we shove it down, it has to come out sideways. Like, it ends up coming out in ways that aren't attractive, that we explode at someone, that we explode at ourselves, that we do things, sudden bursts of behavior that, like, where'd that come from? That wasn't me. Yeah, yeah, it's all you. It's all us. It's that outburst. Oh my gosh, like I used to think I didn't have emotions, meanwhile, having all of these radical outbursts, like, how could I have missed that I had emotions? But that's, when you're in it, it's hard to see yourself very clearly. But I was in that practice of just pushing it away, just like not acknowledging how uncomfortable, how stressed, how out of out of energy I was. I just pushed through. I just had a list and I was checking things off and I was meeting my goals and I was doing what was expected. I was doing what I was responsible for. And I wasn't paying attention to what was going on inside of me. And that way of living, one, I was in chronic depression for like 15 years. And two, I I couldn't, my quality of life out in the world was not good. It was very anxious. It was very like conscious of like just I would cringe at myself, at the things I said, at the way I said it, at the sound of my laugh, at the I was just in self-judgment. It was steep and thick. And that was my life for a good long while. And there was this piece that eventually happened where I was once again, I had gotten better. I was like in an upward moment, I was kind of like in a place where I was feeling a little bit better. And then something in the outside world happened that I was feeling like this outside circumstance has pulled me back down. And I was so I was so mad at them, at this other person, at the world, at like myself for like not being as healed as I thought I was. And that was July of 2016. And I was headed back down a road of like wanting to just give up, wanting to just be done. And I recognized that, like, okay, I've been here before and I know nothing good happens after this point. So maybe I go get myself a therapist. And that's how I ended up in therapy in July of 2016 for the like 12th time, different therapists that I'd seen, lots of different ones. You got to find the one that like really that you like connect with. I heard somebody the other day say like you should be interviewing your therapist. Like, are you qualified to be my therapist? Meaning like, do we resonate? Do I have a connection with you? And do you have a connection with me? Because like one of the healers that I was listening to on a podcast the other day, she's like, if I don't like my client, I'm not the clinician for them. I'm not the healer for them. Like, if I don't love them, I can't help them. So yeah, like finding the right therapist, that's like a whole journey. But anyways, life and the universe and timing and everything, I was ready. I was so sick of being in that cycle, that loop, and my own readiness. I wound up in the perfect therapist's office, and I only ended up having like 2 sessions with her. I could have just done one because in the first 5 minutes, she handed me the deservability treatment. And deservability was like a concept that I had never even heard of. I mean, I understand the concept of like knowing what I deserve. Maybe I, had heard that at some point. Like, I'd never actually tried to embody it and like try to figure out for myself what I believed I deserved. But she hands me this deservability treatment and wants me to read it out loud. And it's on my website. I would share the link, but I hate to slow down. But I will absolutely put it in the description after the fact, or you can go to owningauthenticity.com and it's on the blog, like at the very bottom. It's one of the first posts. But anyways, so the deservability treatment is basically several paragraphs worth, a whole page worth of affirmations of what your highest, most aligned, most whole self deserves. What life does that version of you deserve? And this was a radical moment in my life. And if you've been around my channel for a while, you probably already know that because I've pointed people towards that deservability treatment every single chance I get because it literally changed my life. Like, speaking to myself in that way, saying it out loud multiple times a day for about 60 days, it literally shifted. Like, I demonstrated to myself the power of affirmation, basically, and the power of mirror work for that matter. And if you have any I can't say that. I can only say that for me and my body image issues that I were part of my self-consciousness throughout my life, saying the deservability treatment out loud to myself in the mirror was huge. It was very interesting, the things that it brought up, like at the very beginning, how I really didn't want to look at myself in the mirror. Like I put my makeup on every day. At that point, I wore makeup. That like I looked at myself in the mirror every day, and I had never noticed how like I really just didn't want to see myself. Like if I was doing an action or whatever, I was focused on the action. I wasn't actually looking at myself on a daily basis. So even just looking in the mirror and saying these words to myself was so powerful. And I still remember it was about 2 weeks in, and I was saying it from memory, the couple of sentences that I had like in my memory or whatever. And so I was like really looking at my face and saying these words from memory. And I smiled as I said them because it felt so good, not just to say the words, but to like really feel that truth, like to like claim it just like 1 millimeter more for myself. It felt good to do that for myself. And I smiled because it felt good. And I saw myself smile like that. And I didn't recognize myself. Like that version of me, I had never seen it before. I had never witnessed my own true joy. I was like 28, 28 years old. I saw myself in a way that I've never seen myself. And the words that went through my brain was, that girl's beautiful. That girl is like lit up from the inside. And at that point, I had been going through like body image issues is kind of like one of those loops in my shadow work that there's only really a few for each of us, like that we're pretty much like coming back to on a recurring basis. Like we heal ourselves and we move forward and we manifest kind of the next level of healing, and we go through it and we heal ourselves a little more, and then we go forward and we manifest the next level of healing and we heal ourselves. It's like that's why shadow work is a journey that we're on for the rest of our lives. It's a set of tools that we use to encounter the negative feeling or the difficult feeling messages or emotions that come up as we go through our lives. And so as I took in that deservability treatment, it shifted like not just how I like was speaking about myself, like as far as I was saying these words and like thinking of myself and my life in a different way, but like by doing that, I the evidence was that smile, that like organic light that like I could literally see it rise from inside of me and come out my face. Like I had never seen anything like it on myself. I'd seen it on plenty of other people who I was like longing to be like, um, but never on myself. And witnessing that, I feel like that was like really where I like organically built this core belief for myself that now is what I stand on in my shadow work practice. That is like, we have the capacity to heal ourselves inside of our minds. That mind is powerful. Like the placebo effect is a thing for a reason. Like the fact that people can heal themselves when they're taking just a placebo, like that to me is proof that like our mind is what is creating our reality. So when we program our mind on purpose with thoughts of our own worthiness and our own goodness and wholeness, it's not an overnight fix, but little by little by little, it does move our entire set point to a place where like we're now the world reflects differently to us. Like as I started to pull this organic joy like up out of myself, and I learned how to access that by simply loving myself. Like just, I mean, simply really is not fair to say because it isn't simple to get there. Once you get there, you see like, wow, like that was what they say, like that was there this whole time. Like everything we want, everything we need is inside us the whole time. And I know I spent so much time like focusing on things out in the physical world and distracting myself with goals and to-do lists and achievements and getting promoted and graduating and all of the things that we can stack up on ourselves as like, once I get there, then I'll be happy or whatever. And when we really slow down and we recognize that, like, what happened for me in that July 2016 when I like make this switch, coming to July, like the front half of 2016, I was just deeply unhappy. Like I was in another deep depression, another like, just here we go again. I thought I had really gotten better, and it was the thing where you move forward and you manifest the next level. And so I manifested the next level, and here we go again, like going back down, because I haven't healed those things fully, right? And even now, like my shadow spikes, and there's more healing. There's more things that want to be loved, that want to be integrated and incorporated back into my wholeness. In the front half of 2016, with my work specifically as an example, I was very like just blaming the company and miserable in general. And it was kind of their fault. It was like they didn't see how good I was. They didn't see, like, they didn't appreciate my ideas. That was a common story that I was telling, was like, I can't be creative here. Like, you don't let me have creative freedom. Like, I give you ideas, you don't think they're valuable. That really pisses me off because I think they're valuable. Like, this was kind of where I was, like, in this back and forth with my employer, who wasn't giving me what I wanted, what I needed. And it's pissing me off because I know deep down on some level, I already knew I deserve this. I want this. I want to have creative freedom. I want to express myself. I want to give birth to an idea that feels amazing and so aligned, and then run with it. That's what I want. And I'm mad at you because you're not letting me do that. And I was fighting with them. And so July of 2016, I find the therapist, I find the deservability treatment. The day after my first therapy appointment was when I found Abraham Hicks, and that's where I learned law of attraction. For more on that, definitely go check out the law of attraction live stream that I did last week, where we really focused on that. And what shifted was basically through Abraham and those teachings, which are free on YouTube, by the way, which is such huge abundance. I began to see what she was saying about, like, our reality is a reflection of our inner world. So like this conflict that I'm feeling with my employer, where they're not recognizing how good I am, they're not giving me what I deserve. And I'm mad about that because I feel like they should be. And all of those things, like, after stepping into the law of attraction world and like reframing all of this as, this is a reflection of my inner world. So what does that mean? That means that I'm not seeing my value. I'm not seeing that I deserve to run with my ideas. I'm not sure about it. I'm not granting that permission to myself. Because if I was, I wouldn't stay for one more day in a place where you don't let me have creative freedom. If that was like a no-go zone, if I was like 100% owning that that's what I need and want is creative freedom, I wouldn't put up with a job that didn't give me that. I would walk away. And so after 5 months of like repositioning all of this and like realizing that, like, first we build it in our inner world and then the outer world reflects it. So what does that mean? Anything that you want out in the world, all you got to do is give yourself permission on the inside. And so that means like taking all of your power and putting it back in yourself. This is the leap, that if you can make this leap, you can heal yourself with shadow work. And the goal of shadow work is that we feel better and better and better on a daily basis, because we have these tools to help us not necessarily like eradicate negative feelings, but to be with it in a way that is life-giving, instead of it feels like it's a bully and that you're a victim to your emotions, which is very much where I was for a good long while. So I definitely get that. But these shadow work tools, they empower us to understand what the message is saying. And so like that example with my work, with the with the software company that I was working at, as I took my power and as I put it back inside of myself, and as I realized that every single person I meet is just reflecting something that's already inside of me, every single person I looked at then took on a completely different meaning. Like, there was one person in particular that like was really really a troublemaker in my world, in my like little sphere of like the work that I did. He was like the one person that was just like a barrier, an obstacle, a thorn in my side that I couldn't quite reach. Like, not killing me by any means, but just there to make life a little more annoying than it feels like it should be. Like, that's this guy in my world. And he like really bothered me. Like, I would really get my juices pumping when I would start thinking about this guy. And so this is like a micro example of how the work shift happened. I was sitting there in a meeting where like it's a whole bunch of us, and he's speaking, he's like pacing on the side. And like that was what gave me the vision of, I'm like, wow, he's like kind of like an animal in a circus cage. Like, he's like pacing back and forth like with all this like pent up energy. And like, it was the first time that I had ever like really just stopped listening to like the nonsense that he was saying, which was what was pissing me off so bad, was that I like, he didn't make any sense. He was illogical, and it pissed me off because I'm like trying to make sense by listening to him, and the pieces don't add up, and you try to ask a question and that only makes it worse. So that was the first time I stopped listening to what he's saying, and I just kind of like observed him from like this detached place. And I was like, actually, when you really just sit back and watch, like, he's very animated. He's like crazy the way he jumps like all over the place. Like, he's like he's like balancing on a little ball, like juggling like flaming batons. And like, if you really just sit back and look, like, it's actually kind of amusing to watch the way his energy functions. And I actually like had to stop myself from laughing in this meeting because I was so amused by him. And that was where I saw like, holy shit, what is happening to me? My life is changing. This is how my life is changing. This is how my internal world has shifted, and now my outer world is shifting. He is the same. He is a an animal dancing on a ball in a circus. Like, he is for entertainment purposes only in my world. And he doesn't have to make sense. He doesn't have to. Like, that's not required. I don't have to understand what he's saying in order for me to be happy and centered in my life. Like, he's allowed to be a dumbass if that's what he wants to do. Like, it's no longer my issue. And that amount of freedom was almost breathtaking to me, that like the only thing that had shifted, he was the same, I was different. And it like was clicking at that moment that like, wow, like really accepting this responsibility, like taking that on, that other people are a reflection of me. Other people are helping to bring to the surface the things that I am ready to heal with the tools I've gathered so far. That is the powerful step, that if you can remember to like take anything that anybody ever does or says or anything and take it as a way to work with your own shadow instead of trying to like sort it out with them or make them be different or whatever. That's not to say that sometimes you're not going to take action in the physical world, but the primary relationship, when we feel triggered by somebody else, what's being triggered is the relationship between us and our shadow. What's being triggered is our shadow self is coming up, and mostly when we're unconscious of it, when we don't really like know that that's just a reflection of us, we project it onto the other person with blame. We say that they shouldn't have treated us like that, and they shouldn't have, right? Like, you're right, you're justified in feeling that way, but it doesn't solve anything, you know? Like, it doesn't. If we really want to feel better, if we want to attract something different, it's like, how do we take what's coming up inside of us and be with it in a way that lets us understand, where is this coming from? When I feel pain, that's because there's a wound inside of me that I could heal a little bit more. And this painful moment is to help draw my attention to where that wound is. And any painful thoughts and feelings that I'm having that are bubbling up inside of me are a way for me to clarify, like, where in my body, where in my consciousness, in my soul is this wound? What does it look like? What is the medicine that it's asking for? What is the integration that it's asking for? So this process of meeting your own shadow and being with it, recognizing it, and not only like forgiving it enough to have a conversation with it, but like even going so far as to embrace it, to welcome it to come, to, I shared yesterday in the live stream the 5 T's: train the trigger to teach. I got that from the Deja Blue podcast. I'm forgetting which episode now, but every single episode is amazing. Um, so train the trigger to teach. When we feel our shadow bubbling up to the surface, typically we initially react. There's like a period of reactivity. There can be. It's very normal for there to be a period of reactivity where we get triggered, and there's like a knee-jerk reaction where you snap at someone, or you have a thought or whatever, like you jump to a conclusion. Like there's a knee-jerk reaction that happens, that is the old momentum of like who you used to be, that has like the wound, the pain baked into it, and that reaction is coming from the wound. So the reaction is the starting point, right? Like the reaction is the part of ourselves. Like, can you be with that part of yourself that just did that? Like if you said something shitty, even if you just thought something shitty, like, can you be with that part of yourself that's like judgmental, that's rude, that's bitchy? Can you be with that part of yourself? Like, yeah, yep, that's in there. Look at you. There you are. Oh, like this is where shadow work and inner child work, they kind of share space. Two different ways of looking at it, but I think a lot the same thing, because a lot of the things that are in our shadow came from our childhood and came from our earliest needs that went unmet. So when you have the knee-jerk reaction, when we have that trigger, it's almost like when you feel that come up, and as soon as you can, kind of wake back up out of that trance and recognize, like, oh, this trigger came forward. How old is the part of me that just reacted like this? When did that behavior start? That knee-jerk reaction that's like your default reaction. Great, I got it. But when did it start? And like that's going back into your shadow, and like where was it born, and kind of like unraveling the pieces of what's behind this angry knee-jerk reaction, this outburst moment that I just had. And if we sit with that, maybe what's behind the anger is fear. A lot of times, like, that's what it is. When we get angry, almost always we're being defensive because we're afraid. So if you're able to like take that anger that might have been the default knee-jerk reaction and be with that, and kind of like, sit with yourself here, your shadow self, and where is that anger coming from? What is it that you're mad about? And I'm worried that. And so now we're into the fear that's underneath it. And when we get down into the fear space, like, okay, so where's this fear coming from? And so like that's what's the goal, as far as what I can feel, is to try to be with it in that safe space of, let each layer move through, let each layer have its place in the lineup, and to deliver the message that layer has, because anger is a very different emotion from sadness. and yet they can be stacked on top of each other. So when we have like a rush of emotion, it's often not just one. It's like what one is on the top that we can really feel and see, and it's alive. Like that's just what's buzzing. And when we sit with that, it dissipates. And now underneath it is a layer of whatever's next, and then that dissipates. So like that's a very theoretical viewpoint, though. As far as like, sometimes sometimes you have the knee-jerk reaction and it lasts for 2 days, like, okay, well, what about that? Well, that's where I say, like, I don't know if I'll ever, or any of us, like, I don't know if we can ever, like, be fully healed, meaning, like, our shadow is completely eradicated. I don't think that that's really possible. Again, going back to, like, the shadow is why we have light, like, you have to have both for you to have either one. So we wouldn't want to give up the light. So of course we embrace the shadow. So that is more like the theory behind it. And I'm more than happy to like go into as many examples and details and all kinds of different ways of coming to it, because honestly, like, not even just is each person's shadow work process unique, but even moment to moment, day to day, your own process is gonna different things are going to come through you based on whatever it is that you're facing. That some things are just way more intense than other things, and that's going to call a different side of you forward to help address whatever it is that you're facing and the emotional message that you're trying to receive and download. So I think that is a really good basis as far as like getting us started. And now, I mean, I see you guys in the chat, so I am going to start back up. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are here. Oh, wow. Calling in from all over the world. I love it. Okay, so let's read this. Fighting an addiction to tobacco right now. It makes it harder because I smoke it with my weed usually. So it's like trying to tackle two addictions in one. So because what I want most is to create upliftment and a higher vibration within anybody who's taking in my work, I always begin with, it's it's always about feeling for yourself, what level of support do you require? Because I'm just a girl on the internet. Like, I'm not a trained professional. But I have worked with my own addictive behavior and my own numbing tendencies. And I have a lot to say about that and my own experiences. Um, I actually have a whole podcast that was about numbing, that I feel very passionate that numbing as a mechanism in the human experience is it's a just that, it's a mechanism. It's neutral. It's like the brake pedal, like it's a way to slow ourselves down, and that's not right or wrong. And there's a very there's a lot out there in general as far as like how different substances are good or bad and what we should or should not be doing. And from my experience, anytime I've come to my addictions or my numbing from a place of I shouldn't be doing this, it's an uphill battle the whole way of like trying to give up that substance. Like, and I'm just kind of riffing off of specifically the way you phrased it as far as like you're fighting the addiction. Because that to me, like, it sounds like that uphill battle where if it feels like a fight, it's not right or wrong. There's no right or wrong in anything. Everything's neutral. It's always our story and our relationship to what it is. So it's just like when somebody is telling a story like that, I get really curious around why? Why are you fighting? Why does it feel like you need to fight? Where does it even come from that this is something that needs to change? Because for me, when I have like probably my best example is drinking. Like I was a daily drinker, got like buzzed to drunk every day for basically 3 years. And that was something that while I was doing it, I had a lot of shame that I was doing it. And I tried to stop multiple times because I was ashamed that I like shouldn't be doing this. And when I finally did stop, it was so natural and organic and like it just happened. It just unfolded where it didn't feel good or right or worth it or enjoyable to open a beer. Like it just felt like I don't want that. I don't, not that, I mean, there was a story, and this just popped to mind, speaking of tobacco. So, like, there was this, I think this was a Tara Brach story, a guy that had been like a lifelong smoker, and I forget what kind of head trauma he had, if it was a stroke or something like an injury, but he suffered memory loss and he stopped smoking in a day. Like he just went from, he doesn't even remember that he's a smoker. So he just doesn't smoke. So, like, the mind is that powerful. He had no cravings. There was nothing to work through. There is no battle. It's like when your frequency rises to a place where you no longer need to numb with those substances, your body will naturally shed the numbing mechanism because you're no longer in the pain that you're trying to numb with the substance. So that to me is where, like, I heard somebody the other day say that they are for full legalization of all drugs. And it's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that. And when they explained why, I was like, wow, yes, thank you for articulating that. Where, yes, full legalization of all drugs, because when someone is numbing, when someone has an addiction to something, it's they are numbing something. There's a pain inside of them. There's a trauma, there's a wound that's not healed. There's discomfort. There's like just unbearable pain that they can't be with. And so they take this substance. And even if it's, tobacco or weed, where it's like a subtle, like it's not heroin, you're not shooting crack coke, like whatever. I don't even know if you shoot crack. I'm very not versed. But anyways, when you're doing that, when you're escaping your reality because it's so painful, the answer isn't how do I give up the numbing? How do I give up the substance? How do I break my addiction? The answer is what hurts? What's wrong? Why is it so painful? And that's something where like we don't even necessarily have to know an answer to that question. Like in my case, I feel like I don't have like, I mean, I shared recently about my 7th grade year. That's probably the closest thing I have to like an actual trauma. But otherwise, like my traumas are all little on the relative scale. Not to say that they didn't hurt or they didn't cause baggage that I heal from. Everybody has trauma. That's kind of part of being alive. But some people's it's very different. And is just a bigger journey of healing. And when we have an addiction, when we have a substance that we lean on, it's like going beyond the numbing behavior to behind the scenes with there's a gap of worthiness, there's a gap of love, there's possibly overwhelming self-doubt that or guilt or regret. There's real wounds that are begging to be healed when we numb ourselves. And this is coming from a person that I have um, I have a relationship with my numbing. I use it as the brake pedal that it is. Like when you're driving and you go to, make a turn on a busy street, like it's good that you slow down. It's good that you use your brake pedal before you take the turn and proceed on what you're doing. And numbing, I personally think, has a place. It has a place in creating an environment for yourself where you can bring your inner world into a place where you can actually make sense of it. It can move at a pace where you can work with it, where you can receive what's going on in your thoughts and you can try to have some self awareness. Like, typically, when we're numbing, we're slowing or stopping our inner world, and that can be really beneficial, like that can also turn into a dependency where you just permanently escape. And again, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's where you are on your path at any given time. But, like, I'm a big believer in, I think there's a place, like, even in a really high frequency, really elevated consciousness, I think there's a place for knowing yourself well enough to know how to, press on the gas and how to take your foot off the gas, how to put your foot on the brake, how to drive your own energy. And I personally have done a lot of work, shadow work, around my own shame, around my addictions, and around my own numbing. And there's there's so much programming in our culture. Even just knowing what's legal and what's not is a program that we get from birth, when we learn, like, you don't break the law, and then you're bad and then you have to go to jail. So, like, even just learning what the laws are is this program that's installed in us, that we then, as we go through our lives and we're using these things, we have these addictions. Like, with my drinking is a perfect example of, like, I had this story in my mind of, like, drinking every day makes me an alcoholic. And that word alcoholic, it landed in my core hard. It was a trigger. When I thought of myself as an alcoholic, the shame storm began. Like, how could I be doing this? Why am I dependent on this? Why am I not strong enough to stand on my own 2 feet? Why do I need to do this every day? And yeah, the part is, those are valid questions. That's exactly what I'm advocating. So it's like, you know, more than trying to give up the addiction, see how much we can do to answer questions like those, where what was happening was, I was working, like, for those 3 years, I was opening my own business, my first one, and with that, I had put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself to perform and be perfect and all the things, and in order to achieve said level of perfection, I was working like 70 hours a week, like 7 days a week for weeks and weeks on end, and even at that time, I had my morning time established. I had my shadow work practices established. I was already doing this work on myself. And yet every single night I would come home, and basically the weight and the pressure of the day, I brought all of that home. And the first thing I did, walk in the door and crack open a beer, because what a day. Like, okay, let's reset. Let's have a moment of, like, let's get a little buzz, maybe even get drunk, and we'll go to sleep and we'll wake up and we'll do it again tomorrow. And there was no end in sight. And it was like the way that I was keeping my head above water, to do something that I felt like at the time I needed to do this. And as I continued on that path with the drinking, with the working like that, with the stress that that was causing in my body, and my elevating sensitivity to my own inner emotions, my inner world, my sense of, like, my shadow. Every single morning I was doing my morning time, I was doing my inner work, so I was becoming more sensitive, and eventually I just, like, had a snapping point where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. This lifestyle, this work, this showing up to this place, deciding that this is how I'm going to invest this, 99% chunk of my energy, I'm not willing to do that anymore. And after I made that pivot, it was just like a moment of clarity where it was done. And I just, the steps came with it. And I moved forward from that place because I was so sick of it. I just was like, this is played out. I think I got what I needed from this place and I'm ready to move forward. So after I made that transition, it was over a year before I organically stopped drinking. So for over a year after I physically removed myself from the stress, I mean, that's where I feel like there's a book that keeps coming into my field called The Body Keeps the Score. And I have it on Audible and I've started it a couple of times and I've never like gotten further than 15 seconds with it. So it just tells me it's like not exactly the right time, but it's like that. It's like my nervous system was so full of stress that I hadn't processed, that I had just been picking it up, numbing it, going to bed the next day, picking up more, numbing it. Like just that was my process. And so it took over a year of physically being removed from the stress to like detox it out of my like energetic body. And as I did that, as I physically didn't put more in and I was energetically letting out the old, as my entire being just got lighter and lighter and lighter because I was only putting things in my grid that were elevating my frequency. I wasn't accepting the stress and the overwork. I wasn't doing that to myself. I mean, I was an entrepreneur. I owned the company and I was still working like that. Like I could no longer tell the story that, it's the company's fault, it's my boss's fault, that's why I'm working like this. Like, no, it was me. And that was part of my shadow work, was recognizing like my workaholic tendencies are my tendencies. And if they're going to heal, I have to heal that on the inside of myself. I have to choose that for myself. So it took a whole year of continuing to like let the air out of that balloon before eventually it was like my frequency had elevated to where I didn't want to get drunk. I didn't want to because I felt better sober. And when you feel good sober, you don't need to get drunk. And so it's like, I think that's how it works. It's like we're trying to actually get ourselves to feel better. And when we feel better, we won't need the thing anymore. We won't need the numbing or the medicine or whatever. Um, and that's another thing too, because now it's not that I don't drink at all, because I do. I drink a beer every now and then, like, maybe drink a beer like 2 days in a row and then go a day or two without. And I mean, I'm letting myself have it as I want, whatever I want, letting myself have a relationship where my body calls for what it wants. And I'm learning to listen to myself. And so when I feel like having a beer, I have one. And so far, the most I've ever felt like having is two. And the couple of times I've had that, I was like, no, no. And even now, like it's been a while. It's been a long while since I've had two beers. Like at most it's one. And even then there's still usually this much left in the bottle when I'm done because I don't want all that. But I do like it. I like it. I enjoy it. It does feel nice and it's a moment. And sometimes, depending on where we are on the emotional scale, we can still get to a place where we reach for relief, where we reach for feeling better. And I personally think that like the more we can be open with ourselves and allow the process to happen organically, um, that there's more self-acceptance there, and there's more like getting to the root of what is going on. Because like how many people, this is something that I watched from my aunt, um, she quit smoking and she gained like 100 pounds because she quit smoking and started eating. So like we give up one thing and just replace it with something different. So it's like you can focus on the habit, but like when we're numbing, it's really not about the substance, because you can pick any substance. You can numb with lots of different things, even just like Netflix. It's not even a substance. It's just like a distraction for your attention. Um, so it's more about, why can't I be with myself? Why does it hurt so bad that I feel like I can't stay in my body? I need to get out. So that's my personal 2 cents. And I feel like that's a very shadow work answer, is always like to go deeper than just like the surface level behavior, because most likely it's a symptom of something else that's going on. Interesting. I don't I'm just reading your question, Brandon, on wondering if you could link the talk you did in the past on addictions and your experience. I have some podcast episodes. Actually, the podcast episode that came out on Wednesday was a good one. As far as like, I originally recorded it in August when it was on day 5 of not drinking, and I didn't drink at all for, I don't even know, it's like 100 days maybe that I went completely without alcohol before I came back to it. And so this podcast was on day 5, and it was my very, very first time um, saying out loud that like I'm drinking every day. And that was, let's see if I can do this quietly. There we go. Trying to copy the link and talk all at the same time. It's going to be worth it. Okay. There you go. Check out that podcast episode. I have other ones where I talk about it. It's hard to say which ones exactly, but I know for sure that one. That one talks about my shame around labeling myself as a daily drinker. And in my mind, daily drinker equals alcoholic. And when you start throwing around a word like alcoholic, it brings up a tidal wave of like cultural conditioning. And then that's what I'm talking about with like trying to kind of sort through when we're feeling our should, when we're feeling like we're fighting ourselves, or, it's that uphill battle, like really trying to separate what is my body calling for, because this is where I am and this is what I want and this is me giving into myself, and what story have I been taught by other well-meaning, probably, maybe, who knows, people from outside of you teach you these other ways of looking at it, that it gets very cloudy inside of ourselves, especially when we're not slowing down on a regular basis to really do some introspection to untangle what is my conditioning saying, what is my trained monkey saying, and what is my soul asking for. And there's a very real part of me that believes like our soul asks for medicine, like 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 weed is a perfect example, I feel like, because when you call it weed, it evokes a certain vibration because it evokes that cultural conditioning. And for example, when you like flip your story and begin not only talking about it, but relating to it as plant medicine, and that this is my medicine, and that this medicine allows me to do what I do in the world, to kind of like what you were saying, like about doing things around the house or being productive. Like if that plant medicine allows your inner state to calm to a place where now I can apply my energy onto the things that matter to me, is that not a good thing? Is that not productive? Is that not supportive to you being who you came here to be? I think it is. And that's where I say, like, I think if that's the relationship that we have with these things, and that's how we're reaching for it, is to realize that like this chaos or whatever full emotion is coming up where I'm reaching for this plant medicine, that is something that is a tool that is clearing my path in this moment so that I can take some steps forward. And that's where, again, the drugs don't heal you. Like, they're tools. They're to help clear the path. They're to help clear everything, to clear up our inner world so that we can like maybe relate to our life and our inner being in a different way. And that's where like drugs are not required, because that's really not what's doing the work anyway. Like it's how we're relating to ourselves. But there are I think so many cases where plant medicines or even beer to some extent. I heard somebody the other day say that's a plant medicine. Like beer is made from plants, like that's a thing. So it's how do you want to think about it? You know, these concepts are neutral, and the charge that they have is the story that we put on it. So in shadow work, especially, that's what we're doing, is like evaluating and being aware of what story are we putting on this. Because with my drinking, especially while I was doing it, was this makes me an alcoholic. And that just was like, oh my God, like I don't want to be that. I don't want to be labeled as that. I don't think that all the things that that entails apply to me. And so I would find myself sometimes in my mind, like defending myself why I'm not an alcoholic. And I'm like, who are you talking to right now? Like nobody's calling you an alcoholic except for you. Like, and that's the perfect example of, you know, it's always this battle between ourselves. And then, you know, somebody else says something in that example, somebody else says something about alcoholics, or like it makes a derogatory comment about drinking or whatever. And because I've been having this inner battle, I instantly take that personally. And now I'm mad at this person because they hurt my feelings. But like they're only picking up on and accentuating this battle that's going on inside of myself. And yeah, people are a mirror, and a very helpful one, because when it comes to our shadow, like the very nature of the shadow is that it's unconscious. It's the part of ourselves that is not conscious, that we consciously cannot see. And so that's why often we're made aware of our shadow self through somebody else stepping on one of our buttons, pushing our trigger, offending us, upsetting us in some way. That person is reflecting something to us that we're not able to see for ourselves. And in the mirror of the relationship with the other person, we become aware of whatever that is that's inside of ourselves. And because of the other person reflecting it back to us, we're able to see it more clearly inside of us. So that again goes back to that leap that we have to make to come into the shadow workspace, which says anything that rises inside of me emotionally is mine. It is my own emotional truth. It has nothing to do with anybody else. No one can create inside of me. The only thing that is inside of me is my own energy. And that if I don't like the way my energy feels, that it is totally possible to move energy and to shift my frequency into a better feeling place. Like that's what shadow work tools are allowing us to do. Yes. Tarot cards, another excellent tool. Um, Tarot cards, like kind of the same thing as I don't know where I was even going with that, but tarot cards, like they are another tool that like you don't need tarot cards. You don't have to learn how to use tarot cards to be able to be spiritual, but it is a way of kind of like instead of having a relationship with another person that's reflecting things to you that you didn't see before, it's like you draw tarot cards and that can show you kind of in a similar fashion. It's another mirror that you can look into. And again, like if you draw like there's a deck of tarot cards, the Light Years deck, which I just absolutely love. The imagery just really speaks to me. But in that book that comes with the deck, there's an exercise that has you go through your deck and like really get to know it and get to know the energy of each card. And it has you go through and basically like pick your light card and then pick your shadow card. And that basically this is you setting up a language of like with these cards with yourself, so that when you're doing a reading for yourself with these cards and you draw your light card, that's a message of like just radical abundance and connection, and you're like on the path and perfect place, perfect time, like just total affirmation from your higher self when you draw your light card. And when you draw your shadow card, again, that is a message that speaks to where you are right now and like what's coming up inside of you and what you're ready to face. And so every time, like I did that, and I picked my light card, my shadow card, and every time I draw my shadow card, instantly it like pangs me a little bit, because like there's such agony on the girl's face on the card. She's just like screaming up to the heavens on this card, just like totally heartbroken. And every time I see her face, it just like contracts and it hurts inside of me. And again, this is that practice of understanding that anything that we're looking at that triggers something inside of us, it's only bringing up something that was already in there. And it's bringing up something that we're ready to face, that's ready to be healed and transmuted and reintegrated into the wholeness of who you are. So when I draw my shadow card and it gives me this pang of discomfort, if anything, I take it as this moment where my higher self is almost inviting me into this place of communicating with my shadow, feeling that pain that just ran through me and being with it in a way that says like, okay, so what's behind this? What is it that's hurting right now? Because, I mentioned my body image issue loop. Um, which is kind of similar, but also unrelated to my worthiness loop. My I'm not good enough. I need to prove myself. I need to be perfect, always reaching to be better or more than I am, feeling like I'm not there yet. I'm not powerful enough yet. I'm not enough yet, period. Um, so like that's another loop that I can wake up in sometimes. So all of these tools, the tarot cards, the plant medicines, the meditation, journaling, on and on and on. There's so many different ways to cultivate a relationship with yourself. That's really all we're talking about. And when we're talking about yourself, we just have to acknowledge duality. We have to acknowledge that yourself includes your light side and your dark side. Like Tara Brock was telling a story about how she was in this yoga class, and the yoga teacher was like, okay, so put your right arm over your left arm and give yourself a hug and feel that embrace and yada yada, and like, oh, that's so nice. And now put your left arm over your right arm and give your evil twin a hug. Oh, that's so nice. And everybody laughed, because we all have an evil twin, or that part of us that bubbles up out of us with crazy shit sometimes, like that part that's like, that wasn't me. Yes, it was. Like that's the shadow. That's the part of ourselves that we're not always aware of until it comes bursting forward. And usually by that point, it can be so intense that it can be so hot to handle. But these shadow work tools are like gloves that let us like really hold the hot thing and be with it. This like meditation is my most recent practice that I'm like such a baby meditator, like 7 days, 5, I don't even know, 5 days in ish. And just like that too feels like just another layer of gloves to be able to hold hot things. Feels like just the ability to be with maybe something that feels really painful. And I'm so grateful for these shadow work tools, especially with where we are in the world right now. I mean, there's so many scary things or heartbreaking things or fucking infuriating things that can come up that can be very intense, powerful rushes of emotion that are too hot to handle. And these tools that let us be with that in a constructive way, in a way where we can interpret the message and use it to navigate, let it fuel us to guide ourselves in a way that is in alignment with our authentic self, with our highest version of our being, like who we came forward to be in this life. um yeah. Oh, oh, get on my shadow work soapbox and just go to town. I can all the time. What's a TF? Probably something really obvious. TF. Yes. Aww. Aww. You guys are so magical. Twin flame. Oh my goodness. Yes. Wow. So I don't ever talk about twin flames because that's wow. Because like when I said because, the explanation, the reason felt like a tidal wave like crashing down on me. So I don't have words for that. But um July of 2016, since we spent so much time talking about this, the depression that I was in at the beginning of 2016 was because of twin flame separation. And it was the most excruciating thing that I've ever experienced. And yeah, like, and I don't talk about that experience, like the twin flame part of it, because I think a very, very big chunk of it is still processing. Like, I, yeah, I don't even know yet what to make of all of that. But I do know that love is, it's a Macklemore lyric from, I don't even remember which song, but the lyric is, love is just a tool to remind us who we are. And absolutely, that relationship did exactly that. Like I found my power because of the misery of being separated from my twin flame. It was like either adapt and find my power, locate it inside of myself, or I was ready to be done. Like, this is too painful. This hurts too much. And that was the beginning. That was why I went to the therapist. That was why I found Abraham. That was the catalyst for my entire spiritual journey these last 6 years. So, yeah, interesting. Okay. Glad we got that out there. Yeah. Um, KM says, twin flame, from my experience, isn't an easy relationship. It's been rocky and rough. He picks out my darkness like no one else can. And I do the same to him. We help each other with shadow work a lot, but it can also get toxic. And yeah, like that's, I'm having these thoughts form in my mind. I've never looked at it like this, but like basically, yes, like that's where I got to. That was the front half of 2016, was I was so deep in my own wounded pattern. Like I was overdosing on my own toxicity. Like like twin flame to me is just a mirror on like a soul level. Like you connect on a soul level and every other level because of that. Like it's an intense mirror. And in that mirror, you see your whole self like never before. You see, I fell in love with myself in that relationship, and I healed my self hatred in that relationship. And I was able to do that because I was able to see my self hatred because of that relationship. It brought out my jealousy, it brought out my insecurity, my body image issues, my like intellectual insecurity issues. Like it just was, there were so many insecurities that were inside of me that that twin flame relationship just like turned up the volume on all of it. And there was even, so the last time we separated was 4.5 years ago. And that was a major moment in me stepping into my power. And like my shadow work and my morning time processes are how I was even able to do that. Like basically, he was in an emergency, and our typical dynamic was that I needed him and he wasn't there. He wasn't there for me. I was like the chaser, he's the runner. And so, like that particular day, all of a sudden, he's in an emergency, and I have an event for my work, for my business. This is like my first opportunity to introduce my business to the local chamber of commerce. I was getting to speak at their monthly luncheon to talk about our business that we were opening. And it had been on my calendar for like 2 months. And I had been mentally preparing for this day for 2 months. And I was so excited. And just, it was such a highlight. And then that day, he's in emotional crisis and he needs me to support him. And that day, I chose me. I ignored him. I ignored his pleas for help, his calls and his texts. And after my luncheon speech was over, I called him and he was fucking furious. And he broke up with me that day. And that was the last time we separated 4.5 years ago. And he has since like tried to come back several times. And that's just not where we are right now. And I don't know if that's where we'll ever be again. But this time of this separation and this like choosing myself, and like I am the one who never leaves. In the in between, I'm the one who never leaves. Life happens in the in between moments, in between experiences, in between page to page. Like we're the ones that never leave for ourselves. And I had to shift all of my dependence, all of my resource, all of my power. I had to give it back to myself because it was too painful to keep engaging in that pattern. And so I speak a lot about suffering and emotional pain and depression because that was probably like the best teacher I've ever had, was that suffering of that relationship specifically. Um, he brought pain out in me that I and it's like that's love. That's what love is for. That's like the whole point of love, is that, for example, like here he is triggering me and I have all of this rising to my surface and I feel awful and I'm insecure and I'm jealous and I'm mad and I'm sad and I'm having an outburst where I feel out of control. And obviously that kind of outburst, that kind of like blame and projecting it onto the other person, like that is toxic. That's like destructive to the fiber of the relationship itself. And inside that relationship, like I loved him so much that I was unwilling to treat him like that because I knew he didn't deserve it. So because of that, I was able to like take all of this rad, like just powerful, awful emotion and go to therapy, like to take it myself and heal it myself and try to become a less wounded version of myself, not for him, but for my own sanity, for my own pleasure and joy of living on this planet. Like I was not willing to live like that anymore. And he just happened to be someone that was able to reflect what was going on inside of me in such a way that it was on, like, you can't ignore it. You can't. And the motivation, the incentive to heal is there, because you go back to the person and you didn't heal, then they just trigger you all over again. And now you're upset again. And so you go away and you calm down and you go back and they just trigger you all over again. So like that's where I was in those first 6 months, was like just so triggered and triggered and triggered and triggered and just miserable. And finally I go to therapy and she like was able to give me the thing. I was ready and it lined up. I'm so grateful. Um, so yeah, twin flame relationships, definitely. There's again a lot out there. as far as like, what does that even mean? And is it a thing? Is it real? How does it work? What's it for? On and on and on. And my personal take is always use what's helpful, leave the rest behind. So, yeah. Irene says, I became aware of old patterns and limiting beliefs I had to let go of. All I couldn't see opened my eyes. Now I see life with fresh eyes as if I am born again. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I feel like I don't know if he was really my twin flame. That was a term that I found and like went in search of in that relationship because I needed an explanation for what it was. Um, and so it was a helpful construct to like understand the intensity of that relationship. Uh, but yeah, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if we're talking about a twin flame or the annoying guy at your office. It's all just a relationship. It's all just a mirror. And with a twin flame, you allow yourself, like your whole being, to connect with that other person so they have access to reflect a deeper level of who you are versus the annoying guy at work that you don't ever talk to. Like, it's such a surface level annoyance that is just like a thorn in your side that's not really killing you. That twin flame mirror, on the other hand, like that pain feels like it could kill you. Like it hurts. It hurts and it's coming up and it just comes up again and again and again until you do something with it. And I loved him enough that I was not willing to treat him that way. And that was new territory for me in a relationship. Like, it used to be when I was jealous, when I was mad, when I was sad, when I was feeling left out or not seen or not valued, not given enough attention, I would absolutely lash out. I would blow up my partner's phone. I would call them a million times. I would show up where they were without an invitation, without like, and just be hostile. Like, what the fuck are you doing? What, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I'm like up in their face. Like, that was me 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, I've come a long way. And so much of it was like, he was such a gentle soul and I loved him so much. Like, you just couldn't help yourself. I just couldn't help myself. Like, there's just nothing but love for him. So when I feel all of that really powerful anger and hate and everything else, like my love for him is so pure that I can't stand to put things on him or in our relationship. Like, and he's so pure that I know he's not doing this to me. So then where is this coming from? And that was really literally how I was turning inward and like finding that relationship with myself, where when people trigger us, it's just something that is mine. It has nothing to do with them. They're just helping us to heal. They're helping us to see ourselves in a different way that is constructive. So yeah, there's a lot of work to come out of a relationship like that. Really, the potential though to do work with any relationship exists, like whether you know the person or not. Um, like, there's people in the world that rub us the wrong way or get our blood boiling or whatever, and like maybe we only ever just see them on TV. Like, maybe we've never even met them in person, but they just like trigger us. They cause us to feel like so intense or whatever, intense judgment, intense anger, intense whatever. And like, I have someone in my mind that's coming to mind that, like, I've never met him, probably never will. Listening to him talk literally can make my face hot. Just listening to him say a few things. So yeah, it's like we really do have to like stop and ask ourselves with anybody that we come across, whether it's in the physical or online, if they're provoking something inside of us. Like yesterday, I was talking a lot about radical acceptance and the Tara Brach talk that she gave this past Wednesday of radical acceptance. And she has 2 steps in there where it's like, when things come up, it's like we ask ourselves, what's coming up inside of me, and try to name that, try to be aware and just be a witness to what's coming up inside of me. And the second question is, can I be with this? Can I be with this part of myself, this judgmental part, this angry part, this offended part, this hurt part, this fearful part? Can I be with this part of myself? And as we sit with ourselves, that's where we say, like, the surface emotion dissipates, and then there's another layer and another layer and another layer of, like, really being able to understand, like, what is that message trying to tell us. um yeah, emotions are, they're basically my life at this point. I'm working on more and more and more showing up in this world boldly as an emotional healer. Like, that's ultimately what I see myself as like a shadow worker, a healer of emotions. And I believe for all healers, it's not a matter of, like, healing other people. Like, your first client is yourself. Your first client is your own results and your own practice of being with your own limiting beliefs and finding ways, finding tools to get above those, to transcend them so that you can see a bigger picture version of yourself. And then from that bigger picture version of yourself, work out, why did I have this limiting belief to begin with? Where did I pick that up? Where did that come from in my programming? Who taught me that I'm like that, or that I can't do that, or that I sound mean when I blah blah blah? Like, who taught me that? Where did that come from? And because, like, our higher self doesn't say mean things to us, doesn't judge us, doesn't think we should be any different than we are right now. So if we have inner thoughts about how bad we are or how different we should be, that's most likely more the programming that we've picked up since we got here. And we're all conditioned. That's another piece of, like, just being human, being alive. Conditioning is part of it. And, like, kind of the first step, I've heard the analogy, like we're all in prison, and you can get out of prison at any time just by recognizing that you're in prison and that the door is already open. So, like, to be in prison, for example, is to operate unconsciously, is to let yourself be triggered with anger or an outburst of emotion and to blame it on the other person. That's being in prison. That's being a victim of your emotions. You're not connected to what are those emotions trying to tell you. Not how do you discharge them on somebody else, but what message are you meant to be taking from this? And when we are able to see our emotions that rise inside of us as those messages, as hints and guides and guidance from our spiritual support system, when we're able to take it as a message, as like an alert, as the rumble strips on the side of the highway, we can course correct. We can recognize, like, oh, I'm getting into wounded territory. That's good. That's good to recognize that this is here. What is this? What is this about? What is this wound? Why is it open? Why is it hurting? What's needing to be healed here? And to take each and every single emotion that runs through us as guidance towards our own healing path, to me, that's a healer. So I personally think, like, almost everybody is a healer, because the only person who can heal you is you. So for you to be a healer, you have to heal yourself, and then you can help heal other people. You can tell your story, you can, provide guidance, you can share the tools that have worked for you that other people may want to try. And ultimately, it's always a process of finding what works best for you. And only you can know on the inside, where are you on the emotional scale, and what action or thought or focus would help you feel just a little bit better. Only you can know. Like, drinking a couple beers, is that right or wrong? Well, it really depends. Because if you're flying high, if you have, like, a massively high vibration, it may feel like that's actually a step backwards to drink a couple beers. But if you're feeling stressed and you're feeling out of control, you're feeling powerless, like, maybe it does feel a breath better to have a beer, to let yourself do that. Like, not judging yourself in the moment on what is it that is helping me to feel a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and then a little bit better. And sometimes not doing the thing is what will help you feel better. Sometimes, and that's great. Sometimes doing the thing is what will help you feel better, and that's great too. It's never about judging the action. It's always the shadow work perspective is to be aware of like what's under the surface. Where's my motive? What's my motive, and where am I coming from as I'm reaching for this? You know, like, am I setting up my life as an ecosystem of stress where now I have all of these habits and addictions and numbing to cope with all the stress that I'm putting on myself? That's not an issue of addictions. That's an issue of why are you signing up for that much stress? So it's just a whole different way of looking at it. Like if we create our life as an ecosystem of supportive actions and things that when we engage with them, they give us life. Where when we show up to something, we show up as our fullest, wholest self, and it helps us to expand even more into who we were born to be. When we show up to those things, we don't need to numb ourselves. We have the space and the capacity to be with painful things that might rise to the surface every once in a while, because for the most part, we've built a space in our life where we're able to basically feel good most of the time, most of the days. And because we're creating that kind of life for ourselves, it's like every single action in our life has this baked in element of compassion, so that when something does bubble to the surface that doesn't feel good, our entire life has compassion in it for ourselves, for tenderness towards ourselves. Because if we're having something in the moment doesn't feel good, especially once you get to a place like that, where most of the time you do feel good, you feel functional at least, and then you have a day where you just feel heavy, you feel out of it, you feel sad, you feel lonely, you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like you're self-doubting like everything that you're doing, and like you have no direction, no purpose, whatever. Why am I even here? Why do I even do this? Like, we all have those days. And when we do, like, that is just another level of our shadow that's bubbling to the surface, that's ready to be transmuted, ready to be seen. Because ultimately, like I said, like going back to how old is this part of you? When did this start? When did you learn that about yourself? When did you learn how to tell that story about I'm not good, or I always say the wrong thing, or like whatever negative self-talk it is that's inside of you at that moment? How old is that part? And that part at that age, like let's say it was 7, the 7-year-old you was doing the best you could. So a big first step is to look at that former version of yourself, 7-year-old you, and say, like, I see you and I see how you did the best you could with the circumstances that you had, the tools that you had at the time. And now, you know, 33-year-old me, 50-year-old me, whatever, now I have skills and I have tools that I've gathered and that I've built and that I've added to my toolbox. And so here, 7-year-old me, come over here and let's look at my tools and let's see if we have anything that might soothe that just a little bit. Like, one of my loops that I can get in is worrying that I offend people, that I like say the wrong thing. And so, like, let's say I'm worried about, you know, I upset someone, I'm bad, I shouldn't have said what I said, blah, blah, blah. Like, coming back to my toolbox, bringing, you know, 5-year-old me who got in trouble for saying the wrong thing or whatever, you know, like bring 5-year-old me over here to my toolbox. And the tools that I have now are, I trust that everything is always working out for me. So that just kind of extends that if I've upset someone, you know, I'm in that sense, I'm the mirror that is bringing their shadow to their surface so that they can heal it because they're ready to. That's just the part that I played in their story today. That was the cooperative component that they needed, and that was how I was of service to them. So 5-year-old Carly doesn't know that, and she's worried that she's upset someone. 33-year-old Carly knows that people's emotional reaction is their business, and that if they have a triggered moment, they have something come up inside of them, that's for them to work out. So that is just one example of a tool that I use to soothe my inner child, little girl Carly, to tell her, like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, if you said the wrong thing, all it was that you stepped on that person's button. You clarified for them that they have this unhealed portion of themselves that they need to work on. And now, that all being said, every once in a while, 33-year-old Carly, she forgets. She's still like, every once in a while, I get triggered to where, especially comments online. That's usually if I'm in a low point, if I'm already like in a like tired space or a kind of slightly rundown space, and I get like a negative upset comment on one of my videos or whatever, which doesn't happen very often, but it seems to always happen when I'm already run down and whatever. It's like, that is the moment where this is where I'm vibrating. This is my frequency. I've already let my gas tank get this low. And now I'm in a vulnerable spot where this person's words like just cut me to the core. And it's never about that person. It's just them helping us to see what healing is still being like reached for inside of us, what pain still exists. And so even now, like, you know, train the trigger to teach. Like, it's such a practice of every time I wake up in that trance of anger and projecting all of it onto somebody else, blaming somebody else for how I'm feeling, you wake up inside of that and it's like, nope, bring it back home, like bring it back over here. This is mine and this is for me to unravel. This isn't theirs. And being with myself in that way and learning the different tools from all the different teachers that I've soaked things up from over these last 6 years, like, this has revolutionized my human experience. Like, life is so completely different when you look at it like this. Basically, no one has power in your experience except for you. You have all the power. And that can be very overwhelming. So, like, that's another part of my shadow work, is even trying to like upgrade my system enough to where I can hold my power inside my being. I feel like, who am I to have all this power? Like, why am I powerful? Like, is that right? Should I be? Like, I'm still like growing into my power. That's that self-doubt piece that can, like, as we grow, it's like almost, it doesn't even matter what level you get to. Like, your life manifests and you still worry, like, am I, like, is this really for me? Do I deserve that? Like, it's just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So yeah, it's a process. It's a set of tools. It's a way of relating with ourself. Um, I hope that this has been helpful, valuable, a nugget or two maybe that you found in here. And if at the very least that something has sunk in, that next time there's a moment where somebody in the world triggers a powerful rush of emotion through you, that maybe this conversation has either planted a seed or has watered the seed slash tree that's already there, as far as you relating to yourself in this more productive way, where you take every emotion as a message, you use them constructively to guide yourself towards the life you were ultimately meant to live. So I thank you for joining me in this space. I absolutely come to this work from a place of, I find it magical. I It's one of my favorite things in my human experience to get to connect with you in this way. Um, the only thing that I do like better is when we get on Zoom instead of live stream. So live stream has its place, and there's so many of you who are able to join me, and I absolutely love that. But the level of connection that we are able to make on Zoom, obviously in person, is like a whole nother level, but where we are spread out all over the entire world, like, it's so cool that we have the technology of Zoom to have face-to-face, voice-to-voice, heart-to-heart conversations. So next Saturday, next Saturday, March 5th, 10 a.m. Central Time, the same time as this one started. I will be hosting a Zoom shadow work session for my Patreon members. So if you're not already a member of the Patreon, still plenty of time to sign up. It is pay what feels good, as little as $1 a month. And you can sign up for however much feels right to you. And that gets you access to the Zoom events that I will be hosting going forward. We had our first one this last week, our first Sacred Circle, and it was incredible. Oh my gosh, I'm still buzzing every single time I remember that. Yes, oh my gosh. So, second event will be March 5th. It was specifically focusing on shadow work, and how that format looks is I offer a little bit of an introduction when we first get in there, just to kind of set some vibes. And then we go around one person at a time and have some conversations with some real examples. Like I've shared my loops and the common themes in my shadow work practices, but if yours are different, by all means, let's talk about those. So I take questions, basically, so people can volunteer to have a conversation in front of the group. And others are more comfortable observing the entire event. You can keep your camera off, you can be on video, you can stay muted, you can talk, you can not talk. It's really up to you, whatever works best. But these conversations of like specific shadow pieces that are bubbling to the surface, that are alive inside of you right now. That's what that container, that shadow work event next Saturday is there for. So if you're wanting to go deeper into your own example, I highly encourage you to come to that space. There will be 1 to 2 Zoom events every month for the Patreon community. So opportunities for those live conversations a couple times a month, because listening to me tell my story, obviously, like there's room for you guys to put yourself in what I'm saying and to kind of get some reflection, get some clarity out of my story. But nothing matches telling your own story. That is powerful. So having that space where I get to hear from you guys, I get to hear you tell me your version of your shadow and how you've come to make friends with it, and maybe what scary parts you're still working on embracing. And let's see if together maybe we wiggle it around to where there's even 1 more ounce of light inside your dark places inside you. That's ultimately the goal of shadow work, is to bring light to our dark pieces and get to know them so that we can integrate them back into our whole self, into our fullness, and let ourselves shine forward as the beings that we came here to be. The goal of shadow work is to feel better. I love that. It's my favorite. And I love how many people have showed up in this community who are into this topic. I think it's very present in the collective consciousness right now. We have easier access to our shadow based on the astrology. We talk all about that every Friday. So it just felt really timely for both. There's this collective question, there's this collective reaching for more conversations like this one, but also this is my jam. Like shadow work is my favorite area to work in, to have conversations in. Like, let's really get to the heart of what's wrong and unpack it so that we can unravel it and understand it in a new way that lets us relate to it in a constructive way. So that is like absolutely my passion. And yet, up until just the last few weeks, like I haven't ever been like specifically making content about this on my YouTube channel. So it just feels like a coming together of divine timing to be more and more stepping into this space of shadow work and sharing my story around what that's meant for me, what it looks like for me, and to see, what little nuggets of clarity that might wiggle loose for you guys. And the event next Saturday just kind of organically flowed. Like, I want to have these conversations with you, so I put the event on the calendar. That's how that Patreon community is basically like organically unfolding itself at this point, with I'm curious, I'm passionate, and that is absolutely what's leading the way over there in that space. So such a good time to be here, to be physical in this world at this time with you all. So, yes, I think I'm going to call it right there and bring this puppy to a close and invite every single one of you to please join me in the Patreon Zoom next Saturday, March 5th, 2022. And if you're catching this much later, please still check out the Patreon community as I plan to continue to do events over there on an ongoing basis. Plus, anytime you sign up, it unlocks all the content that's already there. So all the recordings from all the events, all the special videos that are only available there, all of that is instantly unlocked as soon as you sign up. And then I post the link to join the event 15 minutes before the event starts. So you'll just go to the Patreon and then the post is right there. So you join the Zoom and bam, you're in. So that is all for this day. I thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, dear friends, you take such good care of yourselves. And so will I.